Boldwood presents The Fire Killer, written by Ross Greenwood and read by David Thorpe. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Light a fire they can't put out. Avicii. Chapter 1. D.I. Barton. Present day, August 2020. D.I. John Barton watched all four passengers in the Range Rover they were overtaking do a double-take as D.S. Sean Zander accelerated past them. He supposed it wasn't every day you saw two large men, both well over 6 feet, one black and one white, zip past you on the 4-lane A1 motorway in an MR2 sports car with the top down, doing well over 100 miles an hour. At least the vehicle was light blue. If it had been red and yellow, there would have been noddy jokes every time Zander gave him a lift. Despite the speed, the air that raced over both their bald heads was bearable. In fact, Barton found it pleasantly bracing. The extreme weather had begun to exert its toll over the last month, and it seemed as though there'd never be an end to the heatwave. It was only in the last few days Barton had worn a tie again without it feeling like a noose. He was returning from a meeting in Huntingdon in Zander's Pride and Joy, which had developed a roof fault when they arrived, whereby it stubbornly refused to lift back into place. At this speed, the wind howled around the windscreen into their faces now they were returning to Peterborough. The air smelled different. By that measure alone, a storm was coming. The men looked at each other, but it wasn't the time for smiles. After working together for over 20 years, no words were necessary. Barton observed the weather front massing on the horizon, but they didn't have far to go now. The dark clouds gathering above cast moody shadows, although there were still breaks where sunlight flooded through. Barton shifted down in his seat so he could answer his ringing phone. It was D.S. Kelly Strange. She and D.C. Nicola Pignatiello, who went by the nickname Pigs, had left South Peterborough 10 minutes ago and were meeting them at the place where this nightmare had begun. Barton speaking. John, we've reached the address. There's a very big problem with the house. Now what? It's on fire. Chapter 2. D.I. Barton. Barton's phone whistled with the air turbulence, and whatever Strange said next was stolen by the wind. Say that again. What do you mean by on fire? Again, the reply was lost. Slow down! Shouted Barton to Zander. They were pulling off the motorway for Peterborough anyway. Please repeat, Kelly. This time, her voice was loud and clear. We can see flames licking at the back wall of the upstairs bedroom. Lots of them. The blaze is building in there, but the rest of the house seems untouched. Ring the brigade. Pigs is on the phone to 'em now. What about the residents? That's why I'm ringing. The fire killer is sitting in a car outside the house watching. Pardon? Yes, hang on. There's someone at the upstairs window. Don't enter the building, he bellowed down the phone. Wait for the fire crew. The person at the window has their hands pressed against the glass. Hang on. Barton listened as Kelly asked Pigs how long until the first engine arrived. Strange came back on the line. John, ETA for the closest appliance is at least 6 minutes. Stand down until they get there. Arrest the fire killer. We'll be there in 5. There was a gap with only static. Barton felt like crushing the phone in his huge hand. The line buzzed, then cleared. John, we have to try. Otherwise anyone in there will burn to death. It doesn't look too bad right now, so we're going to check it out. Barton thumped the dashboard in frustration. After a small pause, where Barton listened to footsteps hitting the pavement, Strange spoke again. Are you with Zander? Yes? Tell him... Strange stopped talking. There were a few quiet seconds, then Barton heard a creaking sound. The front door is unlocked, said Strange. We're going in. Chapter 3. D.I. Barton. Barton shouted Kelly's name into his phone, but the line was dead. Drive, Xander, as fast as you can. Xander didn't need asking twice. He'd made out enough of the conversation, and he knew where Strange had gone. Barton looked across at his friend and colleague. He still hadn't put the weight back on since his son had become ill, even though it had been years now. Xander had enjoyed a few dates with pigs, but there were words that remained unsaid between him and Strange. Unsurprisingly, Xander's face was stone, eyes narrowed, his knuckles white on the steering. Barton was pressed into his seat as Xander tore through the next roundabout, stamping the brakes to career through the bend. Xander accelerated hard again, and they roared up the slip road and down the parkway, pulling off 3 minutes later onto Fullbridge Road. Barton moistened his lips. He removed his tie. They were almost there. They flew past lads playing football on the field to their right, where the vampire had been, and children screaming with delight in the play area on his left, all blissfully unaware of what had occurred or what might be about to. They were less than a minute away now. The first heavy drops of rain fell onto them, but any concerns about getting soaked were irrelevant. They rapidly approached a badly parked white transit van which blocked their view of the way ahead. To the sound of screeching tyres, Barton was jerked back by his seatbelt. A little girl wandered into the middle of the road and stood staring at them as Xander's car juddered to a halt mere metres away from her. Before Barton could get out, a woman sprinted into the street, scooped the child up and ran to the pavement, and Xander was on his way again within a second. They soon turned right onto Fig Tree Lane. A fire engine siren wailed in the distance. Barton swallowed as he spotted a string of black fumes rising above the houses. The clouds beyond had darkened considerably and seemed to boil as the storm approached. Destruction was in the air as the wind picked up the smell of smoke and blew it towards them. Xander slammed on the brakes outside the property, and Barton clocked the fire killer sitting in a car next to the curb, but he had more pressing concerns. He and Xander jumped out of the MR2 and frantically assessed the scene. Barton stared up at the bedroom window, where he saw someone looking to their left. Grey smoke swirled and amassed behind the glass, temporarily concealing the occupants. Barton noticed a hazy arm and hand appear. The window opened, but only a few inches. 2 seconds later, to the accompaniment of a crack of thunder, what looked like a small bedside table bounced off the inside of the glass. Barton knew modern glazing would withstand a brick or even an iron bar. The smoke cleared a little. Through the teeming rain, he watched someone in a white blouse approach the bedroom window. They put a hand to their mouth and bent double. Then Barton saw a stool or a chair hit the glass. A crack appeared this time, but nothing more. With the increasing smoke, Barton couldn't tell if it was Strange or Pigs who was trying to break. He felt a blast of sound and air, combined with a throaty growl as the fire engine braked behind them. But Barton kept his eyes on the house. Darkness seemed to descend as the black clouds raced overhead. The front door was ajar. The creeping smoke was now pouring around the sides of it. Barton stepped a few paces forward as another deep rumble of thunder echoed above them. He fought the urge to race in, but sensed Xander edging past him towards the door, which suddenly spewed black smoke out like a desperate dying gasp. Barton managed to catch Xander's sleeve and with all his strength hauled him back. "No! No!" screamed Xander. Barton didn't reply. He tried to put his arms around Xander's waist to stop him moving, straining every sinew to hold him still. Sheet lightning lit the house up for a second. Xander's suit jacket ripped as he struggled out of it. Then an ear-splitting, booming bang filled the air, and Xander froze. They both looked up. The window vibrated, and then another louder explosion shattered the glass outwards, blasting shards like bullets in every direction. Barton covered his face with his hands and bent double. After a few seconds, he straightened up and frantically waved his hands to clear the smoke in front of him. When he could finally make out the window again, all that was visible were large roaring flames, which reached out of the blackened hole like the fiery claws of an escaping demon. Chapter 4. The Fire Killer. Many years ago. My mother pulls the blanket up around our chins as we snuggle on the sofa. We were toasty as hell after tea, but the fire has been off for well over an hour now, and the room is chilling fast. He'll be home soon, and the heating is the first thing he checks. It's the same routine every Friday. He gets paid, he visits the pub after work. We wait. The time he returns matters. Tonight it's already 11 p.m. I'm 14 years old, and it's way past my bedtime. My mother and I hold hands. Our grips tighten with each ticking second. We know what's coming. The small TV is on, but we can't concentrate on the film. Our house is unloved and poorly insulated. Double glazing is a modern miracle in which my father or the council has yet. That could also apply to his relationship with me. We can always hear him crunching up the gravel drive. We listen as he bangs open the gate. How he comes home is the second sign. Tonight, the approaching footsteps are slow and thudding. I imagine the breath steaming from his mouth as though from an exhausted beast, deadened by whiskey, not hard labour. He fiddles with the latch, momentarily beaten by his drunken fingers. He scrapes along the brick wall for a few seconds, then silence before another scrape. It's the worst sign of all. He will be angry. He always is, but he'll be capable. Quick, upstairs. My mother drags me out from the warmth of the blanket and shepherds me up the stairs. I race up, giving her one final glance back at the top. Be quiet, she implores with wide eyes. I used to think my presence would help if I stayed with her, even though I'm small for my age and delicate. But it never did, especially at this time of night. Not having put me to bed is just another thing that riles him, although he never needs much of an excuse to remove his belt. Be careful, Mama. Get him a drink. There's none left, she whispers. Then she scoots out of sight. I scamper into my bedroom and slip under the blankets fully clothed, knowing that, despite all the layers, the cold will have filled my bones when I rise in the morning. My heart drums in my chest. I can imagine his key being dragged and stabbed around the entrance to the keyhole. He curses loudly at the door as though it is personally trying to prevent his entrance. The words slur together into one long sentence. I put my hands over my ears, but it's pointless. Now he's inside, his voice is loud. The angry tone rises in volume, separated by my mum's quiet pleading. Then a thud, shouts, whacks. My father isn't a bad man most of the time. His job is boring and he despises it, but he goes every day to provide for our family. He tells me this often. I'm ordered to study hard or I'll end up the same way. It's difficult to imagine anyone accepting a life like this. When I first realised what was occurring, I assumed it was a stage that would finish. But now I can't remember anything. As always, it doesn't last long before he drags her upstairs. Occasionally he will stop at my doorway when I know to lie deadly still. In their room, he makes strange noises for a few minutes as though he's struggling to get his clothes off. This part is over fast. Then his snores echo through the walls. This is the bit I can barely tolerate. It's as though he's lying next to me. I can smell him. Even though my mum's ordeal is over, it's only now that she sobs. I slip out of bed, pull on my thin, mildewy dressing gown and tiptoe down the stairs. My breath is visible in front of me. I open the lounge door and see Dad has left his cigarettes and matches on the sofa. Weirdly, I find the smoky aroma from them comforting. Perhaps, long ago, things were different. I've played with matches before. There's an attraction to warmth when you're often cold. I light one of his fags, as he calls them, and take a tentative puff, coughing slightly. I've had a few in the past and, despite the light-headed feeling, still can't fully understand the appeal. After a few minutes, I stub the cigarette on the side of the ashtray, but it continues to smoulder. The ashtray is overflowing with the remains of both my parents smoking, and I worry he'll know if there's a half-finished one, so I empty the ashtray into the lounge bin. There's a heavy thump upstairs. I freeze. It's not unusual for him to wake up on his bedroom floor, but if he comes downstairs, I'll be in trouble. I open the door to the staircase and listen. Blood pounds in my head. Treading on the sides of the stairs, I sneak up. A growl makes me jump, but it's just part of his snoring routine. I slip back into bed, praying that I don't get a late-night visitor. Chapter 5. The Fire Killer. It's a familiar, acrid stench that wakes me up. My dad tends to burn things in our back garden. I always think it seems a lot of bother compared to filling the boot of his old car with the rubbish and driving it to the household waste place, so maybe he just enjoys it. Once he threw on a heavy curtain, which I thought, but it merely held the flames back until there was a whooshing sound as the fabric lit. I can still recall the strange, gleeful expression on my father's face, distorted by the hungry flames as they reached for the sky. The thick, bitter aroma I remember from back then is in my bedroom now, and it's an effort to make myself move. I force myself to throw my sheets back and get out of bed. When I pad onto the landing, I immediately feel the warmth in the carpet, which must be coming from below. I slide my feet into my slippers, which I left at the top of the stairs, and creep halfway down. The smell is stronger here, and it's smoky, which makes me cough. The smoke filters through the air as if from a giant cigarette. I can hear a strange sort of snapping, popping sound, and I notice that it's not as chilly as when I went to bed. I edge down the stairs, putting a hand to my mouth at the door to the lounge. I press the handle and push it open. The fire is still off, but the mirror above it is full of flames. I take a stride inside the room and peer to my right. The blackening sofa against the wall steams while flickering tongues of fire taste the air. My mum's crossword puzzle book is on fire. The picture frame above it smokes. The heat is a force that increases during the few seconds I stand there gawping until I slam the door, race back upstairs to my parents' room, scuttle to my mother's side and shake her shoulder. "Mum, quick, the sofa's on fire." I grab her hand and try to pull her from the bed. She stirs, then jolts upright. Even in the twilight of their room, I recognise the look of pure terror on her face a second later. She turns to wake my dad. "Leave him," I urge. She jerks back to look at me. Her natural instinct to protect rapidly dwindles as she knows what he's become. The internal war only wages for a few seconds before he loses. She slides out of bed and I pull her towards the door. We stumble over shoes and fall onto the landing. We pick ourselves up and race down the stairs. I burst into the lounge first and stare at the flames that are crawling across the lounge carpet, having already set fire to the door to the kitchen. The sofa has become a ball of furious, spitting sprites. We don't use the front door, my dad having lost the keys a long time ago. The only way out now is through the kitchen diner, where there is a door to a cheap wooden conservatory that leads to the garden. But most of the floor is black and dark grey smoke rises from it. More flames pop up. My mum has bare feet. I point twice to the kitchen and my mum nods. As I sprint across the floor, hurdling the odd leaping flame, I realise the ringing in my ears is sirens, hopefully from emergency vehicles, as opposed to the police who visit our estate regularly to sort out the mischievous local lads. I pray that the fire brigade are coming. By the time I reach the dining room, my thin soles are painfully warm and the skin on my ankles is hot. My clothes feel the same as they do when I put them on straight after being on the rail in front of the fire. I glance back through the doorway, which now resembles a burning picture frame. My mother crouches, shrouded in smoke, still against the stair door. Her teeth are bared, her eyes desperate. She shakes her head. I want to return and grab her, but I'm frightened of us both getting hurt. Maybe I can get help from outside. My eyes sting, and even the few metres I could see clearly a few seconds ago begins to blur as billowing smoke envelops me. I close my eyes, reaching out like a blind person checking their way to locate the door to the conservatory. The surface jars my fingers, but I manage to make out where the lock and key should be. There is no key. I tug on the handle. The door is locked. I can't hear the sirens anymore, only the crackling and roaring of the encroaching fire. A huge bang comes from outside. There's a panicked scream, more animal than human, from behind me. I crouch and turn and, through slitted eyes, try to locate my mother in the lounge, but she's disappeared from view as the doorway becomes a solid block of flames. The swirling black smoke is so pungent that I can't swallow. Dropping to my knees, I realise there is nowhere to run. Dizziness rushes over me. Sickness roils in my stomach. Intense heat washes over me and my head burns. My back arches as I cough. But then there's another crash and the sound of wood splintering. The air clears slightly and a cold breeze kisses the right side of my face, so I turn in that direction. The kitchen door flies off its hinges and an immense black and yellow shape barrels through and towards me. An enormous gloved hand grabs me under the armpit and lifts me as though I've already burned away. There's a creaking sound above me and more cracks. I hear his fast, heavy, long strides as he thuds through the greyer. Then we're outside. It should be cold, but it's as though I'm running into the sun. A blast of freezing water covers me. I open my mouth and nothing has ever felt so good. I'm carried towards more people in black and yellow, and a woman with a concerned face delicately takes me from my rescuer, who, I now see, has a big transparent mask on. The giant towers over me for a moment, turns around and vanishes. A strange silverish blanket is pulled over my shoulders while I cough repeatedly. More water is poured over my head, which splatters on my scalp. There are loud noises everywhere, sounds like clanging bells and whirring, grinding machinery. There are shouts and screams, more sirens and pounding feet. I blink my sore eyes at the bright lights and flashing images. Looking around, I manage to focus and see all our neighbours have come out of their houses. They are standing with open mouths and slack jaws while spitting flames pour from the windows on the bottom floor of our house. But the top seems dark and silent. There's an explosion in the house. A big shape appears and strides up our path holding something heavy, and I realise it's my mother in the arms of a firefighter. As they approach, I notice her hair has gone. She wriggles frantically from the man's grasp, eyes seemingly on fire, and limps over to me. Her face is filthy, black and dark red, but her smiling teeth are white. She pulls me into a hug, glancing over her shoulder. I watch the firefighter yank off his mask. He shakes his head at another older woman in uniform. There's a loud smash as the lounge window disintegrates under the force of 3 jets of water. The flames are beaten back, but they aren't so easily vanquished. They fight again, billowing out once more. The 2 windows upstairs light up in orange like a waking dragon. Another firefighter returns from the side of the house, pulling off his mask too. He's empty-handed and grim-faced. Chapter 6. The Fire Killer. Time seems to stand still as I cling to my mother, but she's gently coaxed from my grasp. She mouths something, but no sound comes out. An ambulance quickly takes her away. I feel strangely calm now, sitting in the back. I'm not cold, even though they covered me in something to cool my skin and my burns. It was quite a surprise, touching the damaged hair on my head, but my hair was short anyway. "We'll have you at the hospital soon," says the paramedic. "The commander would like to ask you a few questions first." "Can you tell me who else was in there?" the older woman from earlier says. "Just my father. He was upstairs in bed." I look into her eyes. "Did you save him?" Her right cheek twitches. She must be used to giving bad news and knows that there's no point in any sugar-coating. "No, I'm afraid we only managed to get you and your mum out." I digest that fact for a moment. "Will she be okay?" "Yes. She has some burns on her face and feet, but they seem reasonably superficial. We're a bit worried about the smoke that got to her lungs, which is why we've been cautious and rushed her off to hospital." I glance in the direction of the house. "Is he dead then?" The woman tries to give me a comforting smile, but what can you say in such circumstances? "We're damping down at the minute. When it's safe, we'll go back inside and find him, if he didn't make it out." "Do you have any idea how it started, or if there's anything dangerous in there?" "My father drinks and smokes, and no, I don't think so." All of a sudden, my shoulders drop as though they've turned into lead. It's quiet now, just the sounds of whispered voices and splashing water. The lights from the emergency vehicles light up the fire lady's face. She looks kind. "Thank you for saving us," I say. "You've been very brave," she says, giving me a real smile. A true hero. "Now get going. You'll be fine." The paramedic slams the door shut and we're soon travelling at speed. The sirens aren't on, which I guess is a good sign. I close my eyes and try to organise my thoughts.
"Keep awake for the moment,"
says the paramedic, who is an oldish man with a crinkly face and grey hair.
"You'll have plenty of rest once we've got you checked out."
As the vehicle swings around, it dawns on me what I've done. I've killed my father. Could we have saved him? Should we have? Tears stream from my eyes, but I'm not sure why. I already know without a shadow of doubt, given a second chance, I'd do the same again. Chapter 7. D.I. Barton, Thursday the 2nd of July 2020. Things had been quiet since the end of the cold killer case. There were the usual unpleasant, serious domestics and general violence in the city, but no major drug inquiries or suspicious deaths. Peterborough was becoming a large city with over 200,000 residents, but the crimes were relatively low scale compared to big established towns. The burgeoning population was bringing her visitors, though, who could smell the opportunity that a fluid, working population provided. Barton was enjoying the relaxed pace for the moment, even though he could sense the team was raring for something challenging. The only slight niggle he had was the relationship, or lack thereof, between his two sergeants, Xander and Strange. They'd had an entanglement, for want of a better word, but then not talked about it. They remained professional at work, but D.S. Xander had been out for a few drinks with the new DC, Nicola Pignatiello. Barton could see the attraction. She was olive-skinned, tall, warm-natured, and had already proven to be a natural detective. Barton knew her nickname in uniform was Pigs, but had concerns about the team using it in her new role, despite her confidently declaring when she joined them that they were all to call her exactly that. D.S. Kelly Strange, on the other hand, was 10 years older, not much over 5 feet tall and blonde. She was a much cooler character, and Barton considered her unflappable nature a real asset. Even Barton heard the gossip going around the department about Xander and Pigs, so Strange must have too. She was sitting opposite Barton now, tapping away at her keyboard. He wasn't sure if it was just his perception or not, but she seemed to have started dressing smarter of late. He looked up as Xander and Pigs came into the office at the same time. Xander had been training her since she joined them, and Barton watched them comfortably laughing together before he realised he wasn't the only one observing. Strange abruptly averted her gaze and, instead, caught Barton's eye as she returned her focus to her screen. He noted her forced smile in reply to his. Pig said something to one of the civilians who was walking through the room. They both laughed afterwards. She moved around the room with a grace and confidence that was extremely rare for a new detective. Even though their shifts were almost over, Barton decided he'd talk to Xander now and rang his mobile. He smiled as Xander took his phone out of his pocket, looked at the display, then laughed in Barton's direction. "Come on, Xander. I'm going for a walk to see the bluebells."
"Tempting offer, John, but I already have a date tonight."
"It's an order, not a proposition." The two men walked outside together and turned left. Thorpe Wood was next to the station, hence it being called Thorpewood Police Station. Most locals called the wood Bluebell Wood because it had one of the best displays in Cambridgeshire. Even though the bluebells were gone for another year, it was still a tranquil place in midsummer. A series of storms had been passing over the city for the last few days, and it was blowing a gale outside, causing both men to do up their coats and lean into the wind, but it was sheltered within the trees once they got inside the wood. Barton followed the path and took his coat off. With cover from the elements, it was mild and a portent of what was due to arrive soon. The newspapers had been going on about the upcoming heatwave for a fortnight. Barton's mother had died at the end of the previous year, which had been an unsettling experience for him. She had a plaque in the grounds of her local church, but Barton never sensed her there as he could amongst these trees. She loved walking around here after spring had sprung, and she adored bluebells. Here, Barton could remember her clearly and fondly. Xander knew this, and had walked in relaxed silence along the peaceful path with Barton on numerous occasions after she'd gone. The enchanting sea of bluebells this year had been the best Barton had ever seen. But nature moved on. Barton was doing the same. He loved the smell of a wood in midsummer and took a deep sniff of the intoxicating fragrances. Then he turned to Xander. "I'm going to take pigs off you."
"Eh?"
replied Xander. "It doesn't make sense on any level to have you mentoring her." Xander paused, looking up into the canopies as he considered his answer.
"Fair enough."
"Does that mean you're an item now?"
"Not officially, I suppose, but we've been out 3 times and things might progress. I was going to talk to you about it. Who will you get to train her?"
"I only have one other sergeant." Xander looked back at Barton.
"Is that wise?"
"I'll keep an eye on it. But they're both professionals, so I think she'll be fine. Kelly's our best interviewer. Pigs will do well by learning off her." Barton wondered whether he should mind his own business, but he thought it worth a final query. "Did you ever talk to Kelly about your night of passion after the Ice Killer court hearing?" Xander chuckled, because neither he nor Strange could recall much about it.
"I guess we talked around what happened. It was weird. We were like teenagers. I'm not going to pretend I don't have strong feelings for her, but it seems so natural with pigs. The reason I've been taking it slowly with her is because I feel torn between the pair of them. Perhaps I shouldn't date either." Barton laughed out loud. "That's like struggling to choose between a Grand Big Mac or a double quarter pounder with cheese and deciding to have neither." "So your advice would be to have both?"
Both men giggled like schoolboys as they turned around and began to walk out of the wood. "Good point," said Barton. "I've never been in your position, sadly. Maybe you should talk to Holly about it." Xander pulled a face.
"Not tempting,"
he said. "Your old lady can be scary. I also know how much she loves Kelly. I might say the wrong thing and she'd remove my testicles."
"Perhaps it's a risk you should take. Will they grow back? I doubt it. Mine haven't."
They stepped from the wood, grinning wildly, and put their coats back on as a squall hit. They were doing their coat zips up as a car driving past stopped and the window wound down. It was DS Strange. "I always suspected as much," she said with a knowing grin. Chapter 8. The Fire Killer. Later that night. Staring out of, I think of the convenience store a few roads away. They'll be closing shortly at 10 p.m. They have a large skip outside their shop, which is full of paper and cardboard. It's been a red rag to me ever since they filled it up a few days ago. A Syrian family runs the place. The older parents are lovely, but one of their new workers always looks at me like I'm trying to steal things. I've been daydreaming these last 6 months, what with all the changes. So I once walked out of their shop with a copy of the Peterborough Telegraph without paying for it. He chased me down the street past a huge queue of people waiting for the bus while shouting "thief" at the top of his voice. I haven't dared look my neighbours in the eye since. Not that I used to do that much anyway. I'd love to see his face when he looks out of his window and sees the world on fire. I want to watch it burn too. Normally, I wouldn't set light to something that large, but it's well away from all the cars. I could watch next to the wall, where I'd be almost out of sight too. It'd be like having a ringside seat for the big fight. My skin tingles at the thought of what might happen. A much bigger blaze is an added risk, though. But they'll think it's young kids, like they usually do. At 11, I pull on a large ski jacket and steady myself at the door. As always at this point, my fingers lack dexterity and my toes are numb. My feet feel like I have heavy wooden clogs on them as I step out from the house and trudge down the road. It's a cruel, wild wind that hurries me towards my target. The air has a hint of rain in it again, but it never seems to get going. Heavy clouds bulge and rumble, but rush away as if protecting their load. Strange weather for strange times. There's nobody else about, which isn't surprising. The local paper has regular reports of muggings. I walk past on my first sweep to make sure no one's coming around the corner. When I approach the bin on my return journey, I stand in close to the edge of the skip. I've decided to use a Zippo lighter because of the wind, and I force myself to calm down as I struggle to light it. In the end, I open my coat to shelter the flame. Once it stays lit, I take a last glance around and slide the flickering lighter into a cereal carton near the top of the skip on the other side from the shop. There's a small path that leads to our cul-de-sac along the back. I hustle over there. The foliage of a tree in one of the gardens hangs heavy over the wall, and I'm almost invisible underneath it, so I decide to stop and wait here. This stage, the anticipation and planning, can be enjoyable. I sense the need coming months before I act, and it's like springtime inside me. Afterwards, I pretend that I won't weaken again, but I always do. It's what I do. The fire engine arriving is the best bit. My knees weaken at the imminent arrival of the big machine, and then the uniformed firefighters will jump out purposefully. If there's a sizable crowd when they turn up, I'll sometimes mingle, getting close to those strong men and women. But I'm pretty sure the police would look at the bystanders if they were investigating a serious blaze. I usually just wait and pretend that I'm walking past, or stand at a distance if I've lit up something big. There was a warehouse blaze once, many years ago, not far from my house. A warm feeling comes over me now when I remember parking up and observing. The heat was incredible, even through the windscreen. The sky glowed better than any sunset I've seen before. I almost left my car and ran towards it. It was stupid to go, even though I had nothing to do with it, and the cause was found to be an electrical issue. I'll stick to my little fires. But the urge to progress has always been there. As I ponder how I've managed to control these strengthening desires, I spot the first sign of life. There's a slight radiance to the far side of the container. It's a large skip, 12 feet at least. As the seconds pass, the glow grows. I try to steady my breathing as the flames rise, but my breaths are rapid and shallow. After a few more minutes, I sense movement at the dark shop. The door has opened and a man has appeared. He halts with obvious shock. It's the bloke who embarrassed me. I can see him reach for his pocket and take out his phone. He pauses, hustles back inside, then rushes out a minute later with a small red fire extinguisher. I worry that he and the weather will beat the fire back, but the pathetic stream from the extinguisher is as effective as him shouting into the wind for it to stop. Each meaty gust picks up burning material and blows. The pieces swirl and race into people's gardens, onto their cars and over fences, as though they are swallows from hell in flight. It's a beautiful sight, but I know paper burns hot and fast, and the fire might spread. The flames leap 20 feet when the man throws the extinguisher into the fire and returns inside the shop. Most of the skip is ablaze. I hear a siren in the distance. I place my hand on the wall to support myself as the euphoria threatens to swamp me. Then a scream fills the night. I scan the area to see where the sound has come from, but then I hear it again. I realise with horror that it's not a scream of fright. It's one of pain. I stagger backwards when I see movement at the edge of the skip. A clawed hand rises out of the furnace, then sinks back out of sight. Chapter 9. D.I. Barton. Barton stepped out of his front door the next morning and picked up the rubbish bags his wife had left outside for him to carry to the bins at the side of his house. A guy from the bottom of his cul-de-sac walked past with his timid terrier. "Morning, John." "Morning." Barton searched his mind for the man's name. He could remember the dog was called Harry, but Kevin's name only materialised when they were both out of sight. Barton breathed in a breath of air. He liked living on the edge of Peterborough in Longville Village. The house prices had been reasonable when they'd bought, but he'd struggled to buy now, so he really appreciated the peace and quiet. It was only a 1950s semi, but it had an extension which they used as a lounge and a garage, which they'd converted into another bedroom. Holly often went down there to watch TV and to have a little peace. Smiling to himself, he noticed the side gate to the front garden was open. He wandered over and grimaced. It was as though the patio out there had witnessed a hurricane, judging by the discarded toys, bikes, scooters, and past-saving wicker furniture. A distant memory of promising to clear it surfaced from a year ago. Luckily, the hedge, which needed trimming, concealed most of the wreckage. He made a weak promise to do it at the weekend, shut the gate, got in his car, and drove to work. The police station, on the other hand, was an ugly warehouse-type building, which had been designed without any love. It was surrounded by more but Barton had a soft spot for the area after so many years. He didn't mind if the station looked a bit foreboding. After all, theirs was a serious business. Barton had only been at his desk for 5 minutes when he found Chief Inspector Brabbin standing beside him, looking immaculate in his uniform. "Quick minute, please, John." Barton smiled as he followed Brabbins into an empty office, although he suspected some shit was about to be shovelled in his direction. "I've spoken to DCI Cox, and she's happy for me to explain the case directly to you." Barton hid his grin. He bet she was. "We'd like you to investigate a fire.
The one last night in Welland?
That's it?
I just read the report. I thought there wasn't any significant damage or injuries.
That's what we believed, but daylight revealed extensive burns to a telegraph pole, and the guy who'd ordered the skip says his car is covered in scorch marks. He reckons it was done deliberately, possibly because of race.
OK, but I'm still not sure why major crimes would get involved.
That's the final element. It was an old skip without a drain, so it filled with water when they doused the flames last night. They aren't waterproof, so it gradually emptied itself overnight. We left a constable to guard the scene, and he noticed something unexpected at the bottom in the morning.
Barton raised an eyebrow.
Yes, said Brabbins. It appears to be a charred human body.
Chapter 10. D.I. Barton. Barton's brain chugged into action. Any chance it's a mannequin?
Not judging by its teeth, no. Our case, then?
Barton said after a pause.
Yes.
Do you have the manpower?
We're flat out at the moment. Not that there's an enormous amount of offending going on, but we've got loads of staff off with COVID or self-isolating. Yeah, we're quiet too. The shops are closed for theft. Folk are in their houses all the time, so burglaries are down, and a lot of pubs are shut, so drunken violence generally has decreased. The opportunity to sell drugs has been curtailed too. I suspect domestic abuse cases will accelerate the longer the restrictions continue. Holly's already threatened to kill me.
Brabbins laughed.
My wife's homeschooling the kids, he replied. You'd need a samurai sword to cut the tension.
Barton chuckled, but he knew that on average the lockdown would hit women harder than the men. They would be the ones trying to juggle their jobs with homeschooling. He made a mental note to help out more at home and to chat with the children, so they also stepped up. To be fair, the older kids had just got on with it, but Luke was still at junior school and needed almost constant supervision.
Right, he said. Where are we with the fire?
CSI have been called. The fire investigator has been appointed this morning and should be there at 10. The manager of the skip hire company is on his way too. Of course, the scene is secure, and there have been no people reported missing over the last couple of days that haven't been located. Nothing else so far. OK, thanks. I'm going to head down there and talk to everyone face to face. Get a feel for the area and the people. I seem to remember there being a spate of arsons around there, mostly in a variety of rubbish bins.
Yes, it's been an ongoing annoyance.
We managed to catch a kid on CCTV for one of them, and he confessed to 2 more, but there have been a lot over the years. We also caught a girl who said she'd got the idea after seeing a blaze that someone else had started.
Great. Learned behaviour.
And you never caught anyone for the others?
Nope. You know what arson is like. Fire doesn't leave many clues behind.
We've received no intel so far for this one. It's on the Peterborough Matters website, but they aren't aware of its gravity yet. Cox has said she'll handle the media aspect. Just give her an update when you're ready and we'll get it on the evening news. After Brabbins had left, Barton spent a few minutes running through his options. Racially motivated crimes were more serious than ones that weren't, so it was important he kept that fact at the forefront of his mind. An aggrieved party might be more likely to want revenge. That said, it was more than likely arson. A skip full of burnable rubbish was a tempting proposition for young boys. Barton could remember playing with matches when he was a teenager, and there were going to be a lot of bored children around right now. Young people did. A sense of invincibility was a recurring theme for each new generation, until life taught them otherwise. As for the body, it was a bracing breeze last night. It was possible that someone could have climbed in for a nap to get out of the wind. That sort of thing happened regularly, but generally when the pubs and clubs were open. It was tough to think about a person being burned alive, but the ends of skips weren't that high. You'd have thought that whoever it was would have been able to scramble out once they realised what was going on, which meant there was the possibility that the victim was put in there when they were already dead. The fire might well have been started deliberately, perhaps to burn the remains. Or maybe a passerby threw a cigarette butt in as they walked past. Barton picked up the phone and rang the morgue. Mortis, the curmudgeonly pathologist, answered on the second ring. "Morning, John. Are you booking yourself in? I thought you looked a bit peaky last time I saw you." "It depends," replied Barton. "Are you offering liposuction yet?" Mortis and Barton had worked together for many years. Mortis was Scottish and close to retirement. "I'd need to hire 2 new members of staff to do that for you." Barton laughed, then explained what had happened. "That sounds most interesting. I'll meet you there within the hour." Barton returned to the office, where he found all of his team. He cleared his throat, causing all of them to look up. "OK, listen in. A body has been discovered." "Where?" asked DC Lester and DC Malik in unison. Barton smiled at them. Despite the difference in their skin colour, they really could be twins. He gave them a quick update. "Probably a homeless person," said Malik. "It could be a domestic murder," said Zelensky, a young detective who was similar to Strange in both looks and demeanour. "You sound suspicious," said Lester. "The Barton belly would agree with all of you." Chapter 11. D.I. Barton. Barton directed Strange to take pigs. Xander and Malik would drive together, and he took Lester in his vehicle. When they were en route, Barton could see that Lester was considering the case because he had a habit of running his hands through his short, thick ginger hair when he was deep in thought. With a tell like that, Barton made a mental note to restart poker night. "Have you been involved?" asked Lester as they raced along the parkway. "I'm not sure what we're dealing with yet, but people have been covering their tracks with fire for years, or at least attempting to. Don't let the fire angle complicate things. If you believe someone was murdered, then you start at the victim and work outwards. Not many people are capable of murder, and of those who are, few would then have the calm to dispose of the corpse in this manner." "Yes, that does seem hardcore." "Organised crime?" "It could be. If it's Joe Public that's died, relatives have usually missed them within 24 hours. If they see that a body has been found on the local news, they would be even more worried, so we might get a call later today when the facts are released. Whereas criminals, either homegrown or imported, are less likely to be missed, and also more at risk of meeting a grisly end. Keep your mind open. This really could be anything. It takes a cold heart to lob a dead body into a skip and torch it. Yes, and a strong one. Dead bodies aren't easy to manoeuvre without the right equipment. From what Brabbins said, that skip was in the open. You'd expect someone to notice 2 people lugging a body-shaped roll of strangely heavy carpet up the road. They could have driven up and lobbed it in off a truck. Excellent thought, said Barton.
Let me know how you get on later with local CCTV for any recent trucks or hearses passing by." Lester groaned good-naturedly. They arrived at the location and Barton parked up in one of the parking bays for the row of shops. There was a dry cleaner, a newsagent, a Chinese takeaway, a chemist, and a couple of units that appeared vacant. Barton and Lester stepped from the vehicle and looked around. Thanks to so many people working from home, apart from the figures gathered around the skip, there wasn't a single person or moving car in sight. Barton checked for CCTV. He hadn't been joking earlier with Lester. They solved so many crimes nowadays with technology that sometimes it took some of the challenge out of it. He grimaced as he wondered whether it was acceptable to think like that in this day and age, but still hoped for cameras. There was nothing obvious. He spotted one on the corner of the last shop, but it was pointing down, not out. The big plus of CCTV was that in court there was less risk. CCTV didn't turn up late or not at all, and it didn't change its mind under duress or forget. Barton strode over to the group next to the skip. There was Serena, who was the crime scene manager, Mortis, a young female uniformed PC called Adams, and the guy from the local fire investigation team, Lee Beddoes. They all knew each other. No introductions were necessary.